I'd like to bring in Michael Kimmage. He is a visiting fellow at the German Marshall Fund of the United States and has worked on the Russia-Ukraine policy planning portfolio at the U.S. State Department under the Obama administration. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us. As the war drags on and Russia fails to make the gains that it's hoped for in the East, will that impact how serious Moscow will be about negotiations?
I mean, I think at the moment Moscow is not serious at all about negotiations, and I think that will remain the case for the foreseeable future. They've not done enough militarily to coerce Ukraine, and Ukraine is so much in this fight that they're not going to be making any concessions anytime soon. So, I think diplomacy is a prospect at the moment, but it's a distant prospect.
Okay. Well, Ukraine is, of course, suffering massive damage. And some U.S. and EU lawmakers are now saying that a Marshall Plan type effort will be needed to rebuild. Are we seeing a post-conflict settlement taking shape here, even as Russia continues its advance?
I think post-conflict is premature. I mean, this is a war that could last for several years, so it's unclear what post-conflict means time-wise at the moment. But there's such a groundswell of support for Ukraine that there's certainly the will to begin the financial work necessary for Ukraine's eventual reconstruction. And it makes a lot of policy sense to do that now, to start the planning now for when the moment comes and that reconstruction is possible.
And are you expecting to see something on the scale of the Marshall Plan? Will there be that many resources put toward rebuilding Ukraine?
I think it's very possible because of the number of countries that have very serious concerns in the sense that they wish to invest in Ukraine's future. This includes Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, Japan, and much of Europe. All of the countries that are sanctioning Russia, I think, really wish to see a reconstituted Ukraine, and that's a very substantial part of the world economy.
And this is all, of course, toward further integrating Ukraine in the Western Bloc. Shortly after it was invaded by Russia, Ukraine applied for membership of the European Union. Now we've heard Austrian Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg today calling EU enlargement a geostrategic instrument, and he wants Ukraine and Moldova to be given fast access to parts of the common market. How feasible do you think that would be?
Well, I think access to the common market is one thing. I mean, Ukraine has already made strides in that direction with its association agreement with the European Union. It's hard to say what it means to discuss EU membership for a country that's in the midst of a war, and there are sort of basic questions. Would EU membership include Crimea or not include Crimea? Basic questions that have to be answered, but I think this is really a kind of emotional statement that's being made about Europe's hope for Ukraine's integration at the moment and also in the coming years.
And exactly how would it help in the current situation?
I think it really gives Ukrainians incentive. It gives them a sense that there is something waiting for them at the end of the tunnel. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and that light is Europe. So even if the technical and practical details are very difficult to work out, even to conceptualize at the present moment, it amounts to a kind of European promise. And for a country that's in the midst of a brutal war, that means a lot.
Okay. Well, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz backs the accession of Finland and Sweden to NATO, something that he repeated to those leaders of those countries today. Are the Russian objections to that, as with Russian objections to arms deliveries to Ukraine, completely irrelevant to Western calculations at this point?
Well, they shouldn't be irrelevant. I mean, I think NATO exists in many ways to defend Europe from Russia, so Russia's attitudes and positions are relevant, but I don't think that there's anything that Russia can do to stand in the way of Sweden and Finland's accession into NATO. You have support from the U.S. government. I think from most NATO member states it will have to be unanimous, but I don't think Russia is able to enact a veto of any kind on this process. It's moving forward quickly.
Okay, Michael Kimmage, I want to thank you so much for that analysis of the updates of the day. Michael Kimmage from the German Marshall Fund of the United States.
Thank you for having me.